Rygar shares much in common with the likes of God of War and presents the player with an adventure loosely based upon Greek and Roman mythology. Now what sets it apart from its contemporaries has to be that nearly every object within each environment is completely destructible and has the potential to soon become part of the gameplay that makes up the experience. For example, when you encounter an enemy, not only can your attacks affect their health, but any falling debris as well. This plays heavily into crowd control, as on most occasions you will be extremely outnumbered, and these strategies are key in order to overcome them. Now what truly steals the show though has to be the boss battles. You are pitted against them in a giant room, and each one has a certain combat style which you must adapt to on the fly. Figuring each one out is a real highlight of the adventure, and the amount of challenge each presents is a welcome addition to the otherwise simple gameplay. If you've yet to give it a go, Rygar the legendary adventure well and truly deserves a playthrough. Project Snowblind is a frantic first-person shooter that puts you into the shoes of a soldier named Nathan Frost. Set in the near future where nanotechnology has become the norm, a regime led by a rogue general has declared war on the world in order to revert it back to a state in which technology is not as prevalent in day-to-day life. Originally planned as part of the Deus Ex universe, these clear influences carry over to the main release and see Nathan having various augmentations at his disposal. From super speed, enhanced vision and invisibility cloaks, there are a generous amount in which to unlock over the course of the adventure and really help propel the gameplay into something truly rewarding. Complementing these augmentations are a huge selection of weapons and items that also present more options the player can use to engage enemies. It's not all sunshine and roses though. There are several aspects that let the game down, mainly the lack of replay value. There aren't any special modes or unlockables when you beat the game, and it only lasts around 6 to 10 hours. Not the best FPS on the system by any means, but still one that deserves a go. Odin Sphere is essentially a side-scrolling action RPG that sees you taking control of up to 5 separate protagonists as they fight to bring peace to the ever-warring factions of the land. Gameplay sees the combat take on a sort of beat-em-up style and allows the player to engage enemies in a surprisingly deep manner. Each character possesses a string of basic attacks, but also a multitude of abilities known as cipher skills. These skills are tied to the character's weapon and see the player unleashing devastating attacks upon enemies and really come to the forefront during some of the more difficult encounters throughout the adventure. Complementing all of this is something known as the alchemy system, which allows the player to essentially create their own potions from various items, such as food and material, which can benefit them in several ways. May that be regenerating health or even boosting the amount of damage dealt. It's a nice little mechanic that makes nearly each and every item you come across worth holding on to. If it passed you by when it initially released, there is a remake that was produced a few years back, which is available on modern consoles, and quite possibly is the easiest and most cost-effective way to get a hold of it. Disaster Report sees the player taking up the role of a reporter living out his day-to-day life. On his way to work, disaster strikes in the form of an earthquake that decimates the area known as Stiver Island. Waking up, you find yourself stranded within the rubble, with your only chance of survival now being to make your way through the city and ultimately find help. Now the gameplay revolves heavily around the amount of HP and stamina you have, which is regulated by drinking water found throughout the environment. If your stamina runs low and you forget to replenish, you will start to slowly lose health. Add to this the ever-looming threat of aftershocks and puzzles that will stump even the most proficient of players, and what you have is a challenging and unique experience, although there are some aspects that let it down, mainly the visuals and wonky controls. But if you can forgive its downfalls, Disaster Report is one hell of a blast that would make a worthy addition to any PS2 owner's collection. Klonoa 2 is a platforming game that takes place in the colourful dream world of Lunatia. Much like its predecessor, it sees you once again taking up the role of Klonoa, who's presented with a new threat in which to overcome. Now you don't possess much in the way of interesting abilities, apart from a basic jump and hovering for short periods of time, but this is where Klonoa's ring comes into play, which grants him a range of techniques that help even the odds against enemies. One, known as the wing bullet, allows you to shoot enemies and suspend them in the air and use them to double jump, but each enemy has different different effects once carrying this out. From exploding barricades to having the ability to fly, it's a neat little system that takes no time at all to get used to. The real star of the show though has to be the levels and environments you'll encounter. Each one has been beautifully crafted and developed, making it a real joy to just simply make your way through each location. The jolly music and overall intoxicating atmosphere make Klonoa 2 a game that is likely to stick with you for quite some time. Taking place in the near future, Lifeline is an entirely unique experience that utilizes a microphone as its main use of input. Getting used to the rather strange setup is itself a test in patience due to the technology not really being up to the task. You'll spend most of your time enunciating words and learning the speed at which the game responds, and might even spend up to 5 minutes trying to get something done. From shouting shoot to directing movement, at first it can get quite frustrating, but once you get into the groove it does get a lot better. Essentially a survival horror, you are tasked with escaping a hotel located on a space station, and it's here that the game comes into its own. The characters, environments and atmosphere is what makes Lifeline truly stand out, and it's a shame that it was held back due to the limitations of the technology of its time, as there was some real potential here to make this something great. Now it won't be for everyone, and the several shortcomings are surely bound to turn some players away, but if you take your time with it, Lifeline is a game that well and truly deserves a playthrough. Following up on one of the first RPGs released for the system, Summoner 2 once again introduces players to a deep and interesting world full of magic and intrigue. This time around you assume the role of Maya, the queen of the Halasar kingdom, who sets out to ultimately heal a tree that serves as the source of creation. Taking many cues from its predecessor, all combat is carried out in real time, with a wide range of both physical and magical based attacks being afforded to the player. It is all handled by a combo system that sees you linking attacks together, much in the same manner as the first outing, but it's been slightly toned down for more of an emphasis upon the various abilities each party member possesses. From summoning powerful entities to consuming souls and wielding swords, your allies have plenty of options in which to develop and nurture over the course of the game. Despite some of its negative aspects, Summoner 2 is a competent and well-rounded RPG that deserves a spot in anyone's library. Musashi Samurai Legend is the sequel to a PS1 game known as Brave Fencer Musashi. Much like its predecessor, it is a 3D adventure that involves a real-time combat system and sees the player tasked with saving a princess from the clutches of an evil organization. Now it's not the most inspired plot to be fair, but it manages to serve the gameplay well, and this is where the experience excels. Musashi has several abilities at his disposal, facilitated through 2 swords on his belt, one being a katana that deals out basic attacks, and the other a longsword used for finishing moves that can be learned throughout the adventure. The entire game centers around a sort of hub city, which allows you to undertake a variety of missions, ranging from rescue attempts to slaughtering specific enemies. There's a nice amount of diversity when it comes to the types of activities that you'll find yourself undertaking. Although nowhere near as good as the first outing, Musashi Samurai Legend should still satisfy those looking for a quirky and stylish adventure. Gungrave is a game that is all about payback. It all begins with the main character Brandon, who after being left for dead by his best friend, comes back from the grave to exact his revenge. Armed with 2 pistols named Cerberus and a coffin that doubles as a machine gun and a grenade launcher on his back, the mindless mayhem and slaughter begins. Now the gameplay sees the player intentionally hitting as much as they can in order to build a combo meter. By taking out enemies or specific environmental items, the gauge will build, and upon its completion, this is where the player can wreak havoc with various special attacks known as demolition shots. These abilities have the potential to take out a wide amount of enemies at once thanks to the range and damage they deal out, making them essential to getting through some of the tougher situations you'll find yourself in. I think it's important to mention though that if you're looking for an intricate story, you won't find that here, but if you're looking for compelling and rewarding gameplay, Gungrave is where it's at. The 5th main release in the Wild Arms series sees you jumping into the shoes of the main protagonist Dean as he sets out along with his childhood friend Rebecca to unravel the mysterious appearance of a girl known as Avril. As you would expect with most RPGs, the combat system is what makes or breaks the experience, and Wild Arms 5 takes many of the elements that were introduced with the 4th iteration and manages to improve and evolve them in several meaningful ways. Known as the Hex battling system, that was seen as a chore by many due to the slow and methodical nature of its setting, better, has now been tweaked and allows battles to be carried out in a much more timely manner. Along the way, you'll be learning new abilities, finding equipment and items that make the process of encountering enemies all the more easier, and with the amount of side content and optional dungeons and bosses to tackle as well, you'll never be at a loss as to what to do. By no means is this the best in the series, but it is still a significant improvement upon its predecessor, so if you never got round to playing it for yourself, it is well worth a go. Well, that does it for today's video. Make sure you hit subscribe to stay up to date on future videos, and as always, thanks for watching.